Okay, all right. Welcome, everyone. I would like to call this meeting. All right, am I on? Can you hear me?
They turn them on.
Okay, now I.
Can you hear me now?
I'm not.
Oh, they didn't turn them on.
Oh, okay. Now it's good. Thank you. All right, welcome everyone. We'll try this again. I would like to call this meeting to order. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge of
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I need a motion to approve the agenda for the business workshop meeting for October 27th. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, I need a motion to adjourn to executive session to discuss contract negotiations. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Okay. We'll be going to room 109.
First room on the right going towards the high school.
Just leave everything like this.
Just because it's an open meeting in case someone comes.
This is
Follow them.
all right, follow them.
Great.
You do that. Good? Okay. All right, open forum. The 30-minute open forum is the time the board sets aside to hear in-person comments from the public. Comments may also be emailed in advance of the meeting prior to 4 p.m. on the date of the meeting, and state in the email if you would like your correspondence read to Daphne Pearson, District Clerk, at pearsond@greenvillecsd.org. This is an opportunity for residents to voice general concerns or compliments, especially about items on the agenda. However, this is not the time to register complaints about specific individuals or about items that should be addressed confidentially through the proper channels. All members shall be addressed to the chair and shall be limited to no more than 5 minutes per board policy 2180. Members of the board do not directly respond to citizens' concerns during public open forum. Is there anyone that would like to speak? Did you receive any emails?
I did not.
Okay. I'll give it 10 more seconds. Okay, so then I would like to move on and move to the discussion, 6.1, the superintendent search process. And I'm going to turn it over to Alan Pohl from Costello and Silke. Alan.
Thank you, Tracy. Good evening, everyone.
Good evening, Alan.
Oh, this is not on.
The gray button. You press
Does it
it?
look like this one we have to turn?
Yes, it does.
Better?
Yes.
That's it, that's good.
Okay. Good evening, everyone.
Good evening, Alan.
We have a lot on the agenda, so let's get right at it and see if we can get through it pretty quickly. Number one, you probably have realized by now that I every meeting remind people of important meetings that are coming up, just to double check that you have them on your calendars. So we may schedule another meeting at the end of tonight, depending on where we are, but at least right now we have scheduled for us to get together again on November 22nd. And then the first round interviews we're holding November 30th, December 1st and 2nd. That would be evening only. And then evenings also for December 13, 15, and 16. So just double checking that everybody has still got those on their calendar and that nobody has any problems with those days. All set? Okay, good. Okay, then let's go to agenda item number 2. We have revised the finalist interview schedule just a little bit. I believe that we will be getting you the rooms, not that it makes any difference to the board, but we will fill in the room assignments when the administration kind of has the chance to talk that through, so that's not a big problem. I think the times we've decided, Tammy, are pretty much going to work. We've made slight adjustments. Again, not a big deal for the board. You know that the 3 candidates are going to be here on December 13, 15, and 16, and that they're going to be busy from 8:15 till 5. Times change a little bit, but nothing of substance. The only change to the board is that I have moved the dinner with the board from 6:30 back to 6 o'clock. So that's a change. I don't know if you put that in your calendar, but that's at 6. And the reason that I did that is a conversation that I had with Tracy that goes to the second part of agenda item number 2 on whether or not the board is interested in amending the process for receiving feedback from the stakeholder committees. You'll remember at a previous meeting, you may remember at a previous meeting, that we reviewed a form that each of the committees would complete, and we would make copies of that form and provide the feedback of each of the committees to the board each evening after the interviews on the 13th, 15th, and 16th. But then there was another option that Tracy came up with that I will let her describe, or do you want me to keep going?
Keep going, I'll jump in.
Okay,
after.
the idea was whether or not the board wanted to be able to ask questions of these committees after they have filed their reports, and if they did, how could that occur? And one suggestion that I made was that if that's the wish of the board, then one possibility would be to have a representative from each committee come in at the end of the evening and do a very short presentation overview of their written report, and then give you, the board, a chance to ask them questions. So if that were to happen, then we've got 5 people coming in to talk after the candidate interview. And so in the interest of time, instead of having from 5 o'clock until 6:30 free. I thought we'd move all the board stuff back half hour, because we're going to add this stuff on the end if you want to. But we would start dinner and the interview at 6 instead of 6:30. So number one, the change is your evening now begins at 6 o'clock. Previous editions had 6:30. And part B of this discussion is, are you interested in having a representative of each of the 5 committees come and have a conversation with you on the evening of each of those 3 nights, after your dinner and interview with the 3 candidates?
Interesting that you
bring this up, because after our last meeting, I had some concerns, or actually thoughts, I guess, which turned into concerns. We had talked about perhaps putting a rating system on the committee reports, a ranked rating, and I supported that. But I have second thoughts about it, and I'd like to put them on the table, so to speak, for the rest of the board to think about. We got 5 different committees, and there were some expressions about the ranking and what it might mean, and I guess I got concerned that if one committee had a person ranked as number 1, but another committee had them ranked as number 4, and a third committee had them ranked as number 2, and a fourth committee had them ranked as number 3, and we chose whoever we chose. The other committees are going to be in some kind of, well, why did you choose him? Why did you choose that person? We thought our person we ranked number 1 was far better than that person. So I would suggest that we not put any kind of a ranking system in the committee, not ask the committees to rank the individuals, just to do the pros and cons as the original outline suggested. I don't know how the rest of the board feels about that, but
I agree as well with that. Ranking the individuals is very, I agree also with you, Duncan. Ranking the individuals could be subjective. We're looking for the entire report from the committee and with everything else to come up with the best solution for us. And so I don't agree we should put finite numbers for the committee, each committee.
since we did that in public and kind of left it there, I'd ask that we get, if the rest of the board agrees with that, I ask that we go on record to do that, just so there's no issue.
I agree with that, Duncan. My only question on this process,
Is it on?
it is on,
Oh, okay.
Tracy, is the format of how these basic reports would take place. Would they be one at a time, come before us, give the report, or would they all be in the room at the same time?
Yeah, I think we would have to talk about the logistics if the decision is generally made. You want to hear from these people.
Well, I'd like to talk to that after we settle this other thing too. I mean, first I heard of it, but I'd like to flesh it out.
Okay.
Jay, how do you feel about taking the ranking on?
I agree. I think that having a discussion with the committees after the interviews would be a better way to get their feedback. For a couple of reasons. I think that in hearing whatever they have to report, I think we'll get a sense of which candidate or candidates they prefer or don't prefer and why. And I think that'll be more useful than a ranking. I mean, I'm worried that with the ranking it gives a false sense of precision, where this really isn't going to be a quantitative process, or can't be. So TLDR version, I'd like to, if we can have that, even short discussion with the committees afterwards. I would prefer that to the ranking, and just would like to understand how much time you think it would take, and hopefully it's something that the committees and the committee chair people would be able to commit the additional time to.
I like dialogue. I ask a lot of questions. everyone knows I ask questions, and just to have a report that I can't then engage with, then kind of leaves me flat. And to try to understand or to be able to ask questions of the chairperson of the stakeholder, I thought was really important. And in thinking about, do we do it have someone come in individually, do it as a group or whatever, I had a concern that if a candidate says what they think the stakeholders want to hear, then how do we flush that out? And so one possible way is if a chairperson comes in, gives a report, everyone is listening, then that's going to become obvious, because it's like, well, wait a sec. You're telling me that candidate A said X, but candidate said Y for us. So I was looking for some type of mechanism to tease that out and to be able to ask questions.
I would think we also have to be, we want to get the information from the committees, not giving information to the committees because of what other committees are communicating with. I think sometimes how much time you're going to have, and if the chairperson of the committee is going to come in, they feel strongly one way, we have to be sure that they're communicating as a whole of the group. Because sometimes when you verbally communicate, you give them that opportunity, that communication might be a little bit skewed from the report. So I think the report is as a whole. I think their responsibility is to engage and try to provide the best overall view. Sometimes I think if it's individually communicated with, then sometimes it leaves, how do I say, some not so secure in what the committee thought. So I would suggest maybe instead of that, if we had questions, like you wanted to reach out, instead of having a definite, then you read the reports, we want the availability to have a question or a dialogue without spending a whole bunch of time with the committees. Because I think really the communication should already be there. I don't know what you think, but I think sometimes it can waver.
All right. So how do we get at the issue of a candidate saying different things to different stakeholders? I guess that's how do we address that possibility?
Well, if we've got 5 different committee reports, they're going to have a different set of questions. I guess what you're saying is, candidate A said one thing to a particular group, whatever that question was, and we're going to ask the same question as a board interview. I got lost as to where you think we would have this playing to the audience approach. I got lost in that. I don't understand that.
I think the issue is that if the teacher committee asks the same question that the community committee asked, for example.
Well, then I could see where that would be different. Okay. But I thought we said we were going to have a set of questions that you would go over, and maybe I misunderstood that. But I thought you would have an outline of questions like you gave to us in your report yesterday that Daphne shared with us.
Well, I think
You had an outline of a whole bunch of questions. I'm not against it, but I am concerned about how long. What are we going to give them? 3 minutes? 5 minutes? Tracy, you self-indicted yourself as a questionnaire. Okay. How long does that go on? We're going to ask them in for 5, 10, 15 minutes. But if we do 5 times 15, right there, right there, that's an hour and a quarter or an hour. Just moving back and forth. We bring them all at once, it'll be worse. So somebody asked, I think Dave asked, if we're gonna have them all together. If we have them all together, it's gonna go on a lot longer than an hour and 15 minutes. It just is. If we have them individually, then how long do we give?
My concern on that end, Duncan, I'm definitely not
Yeah.
disagreeing with you, was I didn't want one committee's chairman to influence, and I
Oh,
wouldn't.
I understand.
Right, and I wouldn't care if a group came in, or a chairperson, or whatever the title is gonna be, comes in, gives a report, sits down, and an expert, and then they can witness, or be a witness to what the next committee says for openness.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
That'd be okay.
But your math on the time is of a concern.
Yeah. Especially if we're gonna try to do dinner after that.
And 3 times.
Yeah.
Yeah, once again, I'm sorry. I think if the report is there, if we read the reports and we have a question, I think we should be able to reach out to the committee on a question that we have. For them to give the report, it's already given, it's verbally given. I think it's just going to keep us here that much longer. So I think if we have a question, we should be able to reach out with a particular question towards the committee, and they should respond to us that way, and that way we get the information that we want. To your question, is the candidate being truthful to the audience or playing to the audience kind of thing? I think with 5 committees, I think you can flush that out if somebody's going to be unprofessional. I think communicating with them and that during the process, I think you kind of weed out somebody that's only looking to give you what you want to hear. I think this is a long process, so hopefully that's, in my experience, it should be done.
So Jim, so they give us work through the logistics, so help me understand. So they give us the report, night 1, right? And then we read it, and then when do we reach out to them? They've already left, they've gone home. I'm just trying to work through the logistics of it, Alan, so how would we do that?
Oh, no, yeah, if you're gonna do it, set up a system whereby you contact them if you have questions, you'd almost have to set up a time on the day after all 3 interviews and say, would you hold from 4 o'clock until 5 o'clock on the day after in case we want to talk with you?
Okay.
Because you can't start making phone calls at 8:30 at night saying, we just read your report, we have a question, can you come into school? You can't do that. So you've either got to schedule them to all be here, or if you're not going to schedule them to all be here, you've got to ask them to reserve a time if you want to be in touch with them at some other day.
I like the idea of reserving a time if we had questions, but that's just my opinion.
From your experience, maybe I'm forgetting something, but we were going to have committees meet at different times.
Yes.
With that individual on the same day.
Yes, that's attachment
Yeah,
A.
I understand. I
Okay.
just want to look at it because I'm trying to conceptualize here. We would then have to ask whoever the first committee they meet is, we'd ask them to come back at 6 o'clock. No? If we're going to have the
Probably
report.
8:30.
Huh?
Probably at 8:30.
Oh, after dinner.
Right,
Oh, okay.
And after the
Misunderstood.
interview.
and after
Okay.
the
I thought we were
interview.
doing 6, and that's part of my time with the time.
No, 6
Okay.
o'clock dinner and then the interview.
I
and then when that
misunderstood.
is
Okay, I
over,
thought you were doing the 6 to 6:30 and it wasn't going to work.
No.
Okay.
No.
So I do still like the idea of having the in-person meeting with the committees. I mean, just to be able to have more of a back and forth and suss out more than we might get from the report. And also, I like the idea of having the 5 chair people there to, we have one board committee chair people meeting to work through this. In terms of time, as an alternative, there might be less overall time maybe. Like, is it possible instead of, if we were to go with a meeting like that, instead of having one at the end of each interview day, to after the 3 interviews are done, have an hour or some amount of time like that, something defined the day following the end of the third interview where we meet with the committees to have that recap. I mean, as I'm saying that, I'm pausing because I remember that I think we were going to make it probably deliberate and decide after the last interview.
But that, wouldn't that mean we would have to be here 3 days?
No.
At the end of each committee meeting, we'd have to dedicate those 3 days to that?
No, I was saying one meeting after the 3 interviews to meet with the committee chair people. But I think that might not work because if we were to meet as a board to try to make a decision on after the last interview,
Yeah, that won't.
then that can't work.
And that was kind of where I was thinking that it would add in, so for example, say Friday, then we could sit and discuss it, but then that's after the 3. So the only way not to add on to days is to do it each day at the end of the day for that. Yeah. You know, I mean, I would envision the chairperson coming in, giving us the report, hear the pros and cons, and sitting down.
I'm in favor of hearing from the committee, from a chairperson, and I don't see why this is my current thoughts. I don't see why they can't synopsis a hour-long meeting in 5 minutes.
I agree, and could we use that time from 5 to 6 instead of having them come back afterwards? Or no, sorry, I take that back. We didn't want to be,
I don't think
we don't want to get that impression before going into it. Never mind. Withdrawn.
Can I just illustrate what I think I'm hearing?
Okay.
Because I'm confused, to be honest with you. I'm not sure. Okay, we've got, let's just say this. Are we saying that on the 16th at 8:30, we would ask all 5 committee, no, what are we saying?
We are saying on the 13th.
On the 13th,
On the 13th.
Okay.
Then we will have the 5 committees, they're going to stay a little longer, come in, one person, chairperson number 1, give us the report, hear pros and cons, sit down. Chairperson number 2.
walks in on, they sit out in the hall?
I would bring them all in together, but
Yeah, I don't see any
Okay,
problem having-
all right, okay, I thought, I missed, when I heard Dave say that, I thought he meant so
But
we
it's each
didn't.
day, we've got different.
each day.
Right, so the schedule now for each day would be dinner and interview with the board from 6 to, what, 7:30? What's the end time there?
I would say at least 8 by the time you put dinner in there. I mean, I think what you're gonna feel by the time you get to those nights is, wow, this is the last chance we've got to talk to these candidates. Any question we've got, now's the time to ask it, so you're not gonna wanna feel like you've gotta rush that conversation. So I would say at 8:30 rather than 7:30.
So the schedule here would look dinner and interview with the board, say 6 to 8, and then after that, 8 or whatever time that interview ends would be a lot, half an hour, 45 minutes to meet with the committee chair people. So the board commitment on that day would be from probably 6 to 9-ish, subject to whatever amount of time we ultimately decide to schedule.
What I started to ask Alan before, but then got sidetracked, and I apologize for that.
What I started to ask you, you're the one that talked to us about committees and your prior experience with them. Have you had experiences where this is the way it was done? And if so, are the concerns that are being expressed here logistically, are they in play really?
I've not seen this system used before, no. And the logistics can be worked out, but it's going to be later. There's no.
Well, can they be worked out? Fine, I can do that. I know I can, and most of the board can, if not all. But what about the committee people? Some of those people had a meeting in the morning.
Right.
Okay, now they got to put time to come back in the evening. okay?
Right.
Okay, if you haven't had that experience, we're all fresh at it, so.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things, I'm doing a workshop with all these stakeholder committees. One
Right.
of the things I'm going to ask them to do is to identify a chairperson for each committee.
Right.
And I will tell them why we need a chairperson kind
Yep.
of thing. And the other thing that I would add is, and by the way, if you want to be the chairperson, we would like you to be available on these nights at these times to come in and talk to the board. That would just be part of that role. But that's when it would happen. That's when people would find out.
Okay.
Before they identify a chair for each committee.
Yep.
Duncan, my thoughts are driven by, I want to give our stakeholders the ultimate amount of input to it.
Same word I had, ultimate was good. It's a good word.
You know,
I'm not against it, I'm just concerned that
It's, you know-
it's gonna layer so many things on that, not only on us, but on them too. That's my
But-
biggest concern.
You know, it's a one-time deal.
Yeah, I don't have a
You know,
problem.
Other than exchanging seats with them, you know, and, you know, if you read the report, I read the report, Jim reads the report, we get 3 different interpretations, you know. Someone sits in front of us for 5 minutes and hopefully tells us exactly what the entire committee was thinking, or is thinking. That's a little bit more information, or quite a bit more.
Again, just to clarify, the written report that you are going to get is to be a representation of the consensus of
Understand.
each committee, okay? Number 2, when you think about time, I think you've got to give some thought to, if they meet with the board, what is their charge? Because I would suggest that to have them come in and read the strengths and weaknesses, pluses and minuses, whatever you want to call it. That's in the report, you got that. So I'm not sure that's a good use of time. However, if you want to have a conversation with them about the report, you want to ask them questions about the report, I think that's fine if that's what you want to do. That's not going to be over in 5 minutes.
That's right.
Would be the only
Okay.
thing. So those are the pieces you got to kind of juggle as you put this together.
And it's 5 minutes times 5 committees.
You know, and I'm suggesting it's not going to be 5 minutes. I'm thinking it's,
Well, Alan, I think that's a really good point. I mean, I agree, it doesn't make sense to have someone come in just to read what's on the paper.
right.
And if we don't do that, then is it really, should the approach be thinking of it as we're allotting a certain amount of time for each committee as opposed to we're going to meet with everyone for, again, is it 30 minutes, 45 minutes, what's the period? It's just going to be an open discussion during that time. You know, as opposed to, I don't know,
Having them synopsize.
right.
So we just invite them in for an open discussion? Is that what you're saying? We
Right,
don't ask
if
them to
we're
make
not
a
going
report?
to have them just read what's on the report.
No, I know.
The alternatives would be just an open discussion, or what's the third way there? Third meaning, you know, if you wanted to impose some structure on it, what would that be?
I think I missed your question.
The question is, you know, an open discussion, if we read the reports, we're going to have questions, we're going to want to ask something additional that we don't see in the report. And I think we could do that. But I'm not, you know, just looking around at the puzzle looks, I'm not sure if everyone agrees.
Maybe that
would
should be the
comfortable with that.
format. Maybe that, we read the reports and bring in the chairpersons and ask them, if we don't have any questions, we don't have any questions. If we have questions, we ask them.
Okay.
So I would,
Yeah, that's sort
Is that
of,
what your word was?
so I would be comfortable.
I too like I agree giving everyone the ultimate input, but instead of having an open forum, we drive it, and it's only if we have questions. Truth is, you know, it's just questions that we have from their report. If we leave it open, then, you know, who knows where it's gonna lead or time-wise, I'm not saying, it's just, I think it's better for us to direct where the questions are. And like you're saying, if we do not have any questions, we thank them for their time and move on to the next, if we have questions on the other committee.
okay, now I'm confused.
It's a confusion issue.
So are you saying that that these committee reps would each show up each night, and then you'd let them know whether or not you have questions after you read their report? Is that what,
I think my input would be, if we had questions,
yes?
we invite that particular committee chairman back. We read it over, if we have them, then we invite them back. If we do not have questions, then I don't understand why to have an open forum for time if they've communicated well enough for us to get their input.
So you'd invite them back at another time?
If you wanted that particular night, maybe we review it and we just let them know we need committee chairman 1, 2, and 3, if you want to do it that particular night. But I just don't agree we should have an open forum to, as was said.
I think we're saying the same thing. I don't think anyone's saying an open forum. I think what we're saying is that we need to be able to get the reports. We're gonna need time to read the reports, I mean,
Exactly.
okay? But we may have questions. I mean, that is the reality. So how do we then have that? So it may be something that is quick, it may be something that isn't, but I guess where I'm looking at, if we build a structure in place, it allows us to do that. If we don't build that structure in place, we can't do it. That's it. You're left with a dead report, and kind of as Dave said, is our interpretation all in alignment? And how many times do we read an email and each one of us comes away with something different? So I think that a conversation and a dialogue then is really efficient in understanding what's said. And if we do it every night, then on the end of night 3 or so, we can make a decision. Otherwise, we add into the schedule, and that's what we're trying to avoid.
I agree. Go ahead, Duncan.
Well, I was going to agree with what you said earlier, because I think that's at odds with what was said here. And if we get only one person from the committee, be it the chair or not, and the way Alan posted it would be self-identified as the chair, we're going to get an individual's orientation when we ask those questions, whereas the report's supposed to be a consensus of the committee as a whole. So if we ask a question to an individual, we're going to get the individual's, and I'd rather trust our instincts as a group, because we're going to sit and discuss any issues we have with differences in the reports, okay? We're going to do that here among ourselves, and we're the ones that have to make the decision. I would be concerned, going back to your earlier statement, Dave, that we were going to get a nuanced response from the committee chair, whoever that may be.
Could we put down a time, perhaps 8:15, and on a schedule, and if we read our reports and we have a question, we could ask them to come back. If they want to be chairman of the committee, that's a responsibility they're going to have.
So, just, Dave, if I could add to that, I think that for logistics, it'll be built in, we have to let people know, do we have questions or not, right? I think we'd also have to say, by whatever time that day, by 6 o'clock, by 6:30, we'll let you know.
Okay.
I mean, it's short notice, but, I think the default would have to be, we're going to meet at a particular time. Shaking your head, that wouldn't work.
Well, no, because I think the order of the evening is, first thing is, we're not going to have the community report until probably close to 6 o'clock. Then we've got to make copies, I got to get them, all those logistics. But the order of the evening is 6 o'clock, you'll have dinner. After dinner, you'll do your interview. And after the interview is over, then you'll get provided copies of that report.
Alan, I don't know why I keep forgetting the order, but I do.
Well, we hadn't made it out quite that clearly. But that's the...
No, it just says 6 PM. It's vague after 6, so that's where we're kind of like...
Right, because
how do we
this
deal
is
with
a
the
new step, that's why,
Right.
yeah.
Too many hands in the soup, really. I mean, we went with 5 committees to try to get as broad a perspective as we could get. I think we can always step back. If we see something that's so out of line, we can always step back. But the logistics of doing this just seem to me to be very daunting. And I agree, we have to tell them up front that we want them. 3 nights, we're asking them to come in we're already asking them to give up time during the day, 3 days in a row, and then to come back in that night for maybe some questions. But if we don't ask them up front, then we don't get the opportunity to ask any questions. So, I don't know. On the other hand, I agree. The absolute ultimate input would be helpful, but I just don't see how we can do it logistically, really.
Well, what if, okay, we have dinner and interview, so at 6 o'clock it's a dinner, right? Say that's half an hour, then at 6:30 is the interview, and is that an hour? So then at 7:30, then that is finished, and then we would then we need time to read the reports. I mean, the reality is we're going to be reading the reports, and then if we have questions, well, sorry, okay, but then we're kind of, that evening, we're going through and evaluating, right? Then day 2, so then that finishes, say, I don't know, 8:30, 9 o'clock. And so, I guess it's not complicated in my mind. You know, I kind of see it just flowing, so half an hour to read. I mean, how long are the reports going to be? 2 pages?
2 pages.
2 pages.
5 of them.
Okay, so
Right.
5. So how long does it take? I mean, you know, if we're just doing the throughput, so half an hour to read it and everything else. So that's at 8 o'clock. So at 8 o'clock, then we would ask the chair people to come, be available for questions. I think we're going to have questions, all right? And then I see it as half an hour. So then 8:30, then they leave, and then we'll probably have another discussion, and so we're finished by 9:30. I mean, we're having a discussion right now about the logistics. You think we're not going to have questions about the committee reports? Come on, guys.
I guess if we're going to communicate and get as much as we can, then, I think 8 o'clock might be pushing it a little bit to have them here. I think if that's the case and we're just going to bite the bullet and get it done, get as much as we can, I would say probably target 8:30, and then we might be 5 minutes over, have them available at 8:30, and if you can get it done in 30 minutes to 45 minutes, if we have to just deal with it not saying deal with it, but to get the information that we need. I just stress that we drive the information on what we need to fill our minds on what their thoughts are. And so I would say 8:30, and then we'd probably have them, realistically, we're probably going to be 9:45 when we're out of here, I would say, each night. And it'll be the 3 nights if that's what you want, the communication. But that's what it is to get the information.
Probably should build in, and I think, I would agree with Jim on the 8:30. I think an hour and a half with 7 people in an interview, yeah, probably an hour and a half, so that, I think 8:30 is a better time. We also need to build in probably a few minutes at the end after the committee members leave. I think you're probably going to want to spend some time talking about what you heard that day, not making decisions, but just debriefing the discussions with these people if they come in, and discussions on your reading of the written reports that you'll be getting.
And I think, Jim, it's a very valid point. So when we have questions and so forth, really handling it that way. But I think that the communication is essential.
I agree with that, to get the info. I just want us to steer it instead of it
Yes.
steer. We have the information, we want to fill what we need.
When we talked about the dinner meetings, we said we'd talk to Tracy about whether she wanted to do it or whether we were going to cater. Has that decision been made?
Yes,
And what are we doing?
they're being done by the school staff.
It's going to be done by school staff.
Right.
Is it going to be in this room?
In the school.
And that's where, in the school, are we going to have the here and we're going to have the interviews here? Are we going to ask,
We have,
are we going to have a few minutes? Are we going to give a few minutes to break down the dinner? Or are we going to do dinner over there and then come over here and let other? I just don't think a half hour for dinner makes any sense at all. It's at least to me an hour.
if it were me, I'd figure this is gonna be over around 10 o'clock.
I'm not worried about over, I just
So
want
all
to
the
make sure,
details that go
I gotta
into
make
it,
sure we know what we're
it's-
doing. A half hour for dinner, I just don't think makes sense.
I would trust that the school
sandwiches.
staff will get us.
Right.
Well, I don't care, I was looking forward to a 7-course dinner, but
There
if
you
it
go.
turns out to be a sandwich, that's okay, we'll just label it the Tracy dinner. But
Right.
the reality is, I'm trying to be funny, but I'm concerned about trying to squish a whole bunch of stuff into what was already a very tedious and long process. And I think if we invite 5 people in here, okay, after trying to digest a report in a half hour or so, and then ask a bunch of questions, I think we're gonna be here till 10, and then 10 will be 11, okay? And that's okay. I can stay up till 11, I'm a big boy. But the reality is, we're making this very, very complicated, and I don't think it has to be.
I think one thing that, I was communicating earlier, one thing I do like about doing that, from thinking, it does, without a doubt, let the community know that we are taking absolutely every input we can. And in order to make the most vital decision for our school board. So, as complex it is, I'm sure it's on every turn, but hopefully this allows us to make the community feel comfortable with the input and the way we're handling it.
So we're in agreement, that we will do it. We have logistics, that Alan, with all of his expertise, will help to smooth it through. I think that if we need to adjust it, after the first day, we adjust it. That's the beauty. It's not so static that it's set in stone. Would that help, Duncan, kind of allay some of your concerns? And if we make
No,
it,
my concerns are that we're putting an awful lot on an individual who is self-identifying, okay? And I'm concerned that we're going to get a bias that goes beyond the report. Having said that, I hear the sentiment of the rest and I can live with that. But the reality is, I think, that these are going to be very long nights, and I'm not sure after 3 days whether in my head it's going to be a jumble or not. Tammy keeps reminding me how old I am, so I'm worried about that.
I say we go for it.
So do
Okay.
Do you want them here together, or do you want them at different times, the 5 people? And one of whom is gonna be a student?
I thought the concept was that we're together. I'm against it if they're individual.
Yeah.
If we do individually, it just goes on forever.
It defeats the purpose.
I like Jim's idea. We bring them all in and we drive it. If we have questions, we ask them. If there's no questions, then we excuse them.
God forbid we have no questions for the first
But at this
day.
point,
God forbid we have no questions the first day and we ask them to go back 2 more days.
But what it prevents by us driving this allows a chairman having a personal voice. It's a collective committee voice. So always, you know, they're just a representative. And I think
How can you say that?
because we have a particular question.
We're gonna get their individual answer, not the committee's answer.
That was my original concern on that, but I think if we steer the question instead of them trying to bias us on an opinion, I think we can pick that out. It's not 100%, but I think it's
Okay.
a lot better if we drive it.
Oh, I totally agree, we have to drive it. But I still think it opens up the potential for a biased response, that's all. We're concerned about biased response from the person we're trying to hire. I'm concerned about if not a focused bias, an unintended bias, and I'm more in tune with the latter than the former. I'm not suggesting anybody's going to come in here and try to you know, suborn the idea behind the whole committee's report, but you know, the committee, the report, supposedly, if it's done right, is it agreed to by the whole committee? And then if we get anything that's even slightly nuanced from an individual, there's a concern there, that's all, okay? But
I
if the
think
rest of
that
the, go ahead.
If we, when we ask the questions, then we need to formulate it in such a way that the report says this, you know, and to try to address that.
Then I think there's only one person can ask questions. I think if you're going to try to do that, there's only one person should ask the questions. Everybody, well, you already said, with an email, everybody's got a different interpretation. You said when we have email, everybody got a different interpretation. If it's a free-for-all and we can all ask questions, it seems to me no?
No, what I understood was we will go over all the reports prior to them coming back. We will collectively communicate what our questions are and then have them addressed. Tracy, you can ask the question. You know, I'm fine with that, but it would be, we would already know what questions are going to be asked to the committee. I think that's the whole point in bringing back at 8:30 so we can digest their report and then move forward.
Yeah, and I think that when they come back, I mean, the board can ask questions. I don't think there's any problem there. And Duncan, I mean, to your point, for the bias, when you say the bias perspective, what I hear that to mean is just simply that, as I think you said, we're asking one individual to speak for the committee. We would be asking something where they maybe don't know what the committee itself would think. I heard you, not as suggesting there's any like.
No, I've gone through this before, and I know that.
But I'm just clarifying that I think that the bias is simply that you're asking an individual to speak for a group where they may not have discussed something, but it is what it is. I think that we'll get good information, good feedback from the committee chair people. And that, I think it'll be fine for the board just to ask questions. We just need to, I would suggest, have a firm time limit, not just for our sakes, but especially for the chair people who are volunteering, hopefully additional time to come talk to us.
So the charge to these 5 people is to be here to respond to any board questions, not to make a presentation.
Correct.
Okay. I think Tracy's right. You gotta have questions. If you're asking people to leave their homes at 8:15 at night to come in here, I hope you're gonna have questions.
I think
3
we
nights
will.
in a row, okay.
Yeah, yes.
Oh, that's what dinner was.
Okay. Okay. So, is that number 2?
Wow. 3.
That was easy. 3. Invitations to get all the people on the committee. Just want the board to know that I provided an initial draft. Tracy has revised those invitations a little bit. She's working with Daphne and Tammy, and the invitations should be ready to go out very shortly, so that's on target. Everything should be taken care of. I don't see any issues with invitations.
Right, I think that,
Okay.
They're all done, so we'll just, because we agreed whether, there was one question whether we should do a Google document or simply just have everyone contact Daphne. And Daphne, if you want to share your response.
They can just email me if they're interested in being on the committee, and I'll keep a tally.
So basically, they're all ready to go. The goal is to send it out on tomorrow or Friday at the latest, and ask everyone to respond by the following Friday, the 5th. Okay, so that's on schedule.
Okay, number 4. With attachment A, you can see that, as we've mentioned, it's a very busy day on these 3 days for each of the candidates. And in order to keep this on schedule and not have it start to slip 5 minutes here and 10 minutes there, we need somebody to be the host for the day, to make sure that the candidate gets to the right room at the right time and is ready to be picked up at the right time, somebody to keep this on schedule. We have Daphne being the host for the first round interviews when they come in for the first interviews in the evening, but we also need a host to oversee this schedule being implemented.
How about reaching out to retired teachers? Would your wife be available?
Mine? She's gotta work. I'm like,
Oh, I don't know if she's working. Oh, okay.
I don't know, you took me off guard.
I didn't mean to, but
No, I was-
I've been trying to think of who we can't get teachers out of. I don't want to ask a teacher to come out of classes and whatever.
Can I suggest myself to
They
bring them
could.
around?
Oh,
Yeah,
Can you-
oftentimes it's it's the superintendent.
I'll second that.
yeah.
We
All
don't
in
need to talk
favor?
about
Aye.
this.
You got it.
I had a lot more presumption on his wife's time than yours, but that's fine. Does your wife work? I didn't know she was
No,
working
she's
for.
not.
All right, so Tammy is the answer to number 4.
Finding the rooms okay?
Well, we're gonna figure out all of the rooms, yes.
Okay,
You know where.
okay.
Did we win?
Very
That was
good.
easy.
Number
Thank you, Tammy.
Thank you,
You're
Tammy.
welcome.
Number 5 is an attachment B. This is a memo that has been drafted for Tracy to look at to send out to everybody. It simply outlines what the whole search process is going to be. This is the communication that lets everybody know exactly what's happening in this whole process. So again, Tracy may want to tinker with this to make it sound like it's her style, whatever, but this is ready to go out at any time.
This is the one you
so-
shared with us through Daphne, right?
Yes, all this stuff is, well, it's what I copied you on last night. You went-
Oh, you copied, okay. I thought, yes.
Yes, I copied you
Yeah, I got it.
electronically, and then Daphne's giving you paper copies for tonight, right? Yeah. Yep, it's attachment B.
Yep.
So one of the things we said is we wanted to provide the community and basically everyone with an update of where we are. We kind of know where we're at. We do have the recordings and so forth, but we thought that it would be helpful to issue some type of written communication. So I'll go through and I figure it is the least I can do to make sure that, that I've written it and everything else, and then the goal would be to issue it by Friday. I think that would be fine.
Got to change the date, then it's dated
I
tomorrow.
will. Absolutely.
I think going on Friday would be good because you're going to request for the committee members on Friday.
Fine. So in fact, what I could do is I can get this out by end of business tomorrow. And then we could have the invitations go out on Friday. So I'm willing to do that. Yes, Duncan?
As long as you're sending invitations out, why don't you send a copy of this with the invitations? And so noted. I mean,
Two
give-
separate messages, and I don't want
Okay.
the invitation to be lost in kind of, here's the latest update.
Attachment A goes with the attachment B memo.
Attachment A
That's
goes
the
with-
schedule.
Right.
goes with the
Invitation.
invitation. I'm sorry, I misspoke. Goes with, not attachment, goes with the invitation.
Right.
Correct.
And all I was suggesting is, since we haven't outlined the staff, it would be, but that's fine. It was just a thought,
Yeah.
no big deal.
All right.
So
Okay, so that's
this
all.
will go out, communication, here's the update on the process, will go out tomorrow, end of business Thursday, and then the invitations will go out on Friday with the deadline, or please respond by the following Friday. Okay, thanks.
Okay, number 6, you'll remember that we did a survey that was available for community members, staff, and students to fill out over the last few weeks. They did that thanks to Daphne and Tammy maybe, and any other technical people that had a hand in this, but I think Daphne did most of it, so thank you to her for getting this up and downloading the results. So attachment C that you have in your packet tonight is my way of saying I think this is what people really want to know about this survey. We have all sorts of statistical data about means and modes and medians and standard deviations, but I think what people really want to know is, what do these 672 people, big number, that filled out this survey, what did they think were the most important characteristics that the superintendent should have? And what do they really not think is all that important? So what I've done is gone through the, 35 or so questions that were ranked by these 672 people who completed it, and said which ones had the highest average scores and which ones had the lowest average scores. And the ones with the highest average scores are in the middle, the 6 most important characteristics. And the lowest scores are on the bottom, the 6 least important characteristics. Of the 672 people who completed the report, you can see about 330 of them were parents, 125 instructional staff members, 38 students, 59 non-instructional staff members, and 120 or so community members. Very, very good response. So what do people think is important? Most importantly, they hope that the new superintendent is able to inspire and motivate faculty, staff, and students. Number 1. Number 2, someone who exhibits a great deal of integrity. And number 3, someone who understands the curriculum issues in New York State. After that, what you see, the next 3 most important things are all kind of people skill related, interpersonal relationship. Somebody that can talk to people, somebody who can relate to people. So 3 of the top 6, admittedly 4, 5, and 6, are about relationships with people. And the most important, again, inspire people. Number 2 is integrity, and number 3 is curriculum. Those are the most important things that these almost 700 people talked about. Least important, capital projects, probably because you've moved along the road and are in very good shape with that. Experience as either a superintendent or a central office administrator. The people that fill out the survey don't think that's important. Professionally active at the local, state, and national level, not important. Has a doctorate, not important. And has published articles on education, not important. So, as I said, there's tons of statistical data, but as I look at the results of that survey, and we'll talk again about this as we talk about interview questions, but for me, this is the synopsis of that survey that I think highlights the findings. My suggestion would be that this, I don't know what else you may want to put up, would go on your website and say we put out a survey thanks to you 700 people who responded. Here are the highlights of the results, and this and anything else you want to put up. But I'd put that right on the website and let people know that this is what they had to say.
That's a good suggestion, thank you. I think people want feedback, so sure.
Something like that.
Say that again, Justine.
Do you want something like this on the website?
Sure.
Yeah, I think just as presented here, it's simple, straightforward, important information. It's a good idea, Alan. Thank you.
In your workshop with the committees, are you going to stress those, the most important anyway? I don't care about the least important, but the most important, maybe even flesh it out to the top 10 so that they have a basis, okay.
Yep. Yeah, the agenda for the committee workshop has probably got a dozen items on it.
Okay.
This would be one of them. Questions? Really nice job getting that up as quickly as you did and getting the results tabulated, and I think in terms of a communications vehicle, short and sweet, simple, right there. So that's it. I think the rest of the stuff is,
Right, so with that, then, open closing forum. So then I would like to, the 15-minute open closing forum is the time the board sets aside to hear in-person comments from the public, and comments may also be emailed in advance of the meeting. Are there any comments? Has anyone sent an email?
They have not.
We have the public there. If there's any comments, now is your time? No? Okay. All right, then I need a motion to adjourn to executive session to review candidate applications for the superintendent of schools.
Dave and Jim?
Yeah, any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay.